Welcome to Brother Owl's Garden. I'm Brian, and I honor your presence here today. I would also like the great honor of introducing to you a very luminous figure who I've admired him for years for all that he is and all that he does. Today we have with us Deng Ming Dao coming in from San Francisco, and it is very much a great honor to have Ming Dao with us today. He is an artist, a spiritualist, an author, a philosopher, a martial artist in Qigong and Gong Fu, and also a teacher. And he has over a dozen books, mainly centered on Taoist teachings. They also include some I Ching and Zen inspired publications. You can find his books in many different vendors, especially my personal favorite, bookdepository.com, and of course, Amazon and Thrift Books, and any of those that are your personal favorites. So without any further ado, I would like to welcome Mr. Deng Ming Dao.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
It's a great honor for me to host you, and I just can't adequately thank you for being here. It's really wonderful, and I'm happy to be speaking to you personally rather than just a few scattered emails over, I think, about the last 3 years. But it's a great honor to have you.
The honor is mine, and it's good to be able to talk to you in person, really, instead of just correspondence.
Yeah, email doesn't cut it. Zoom is much better. So the first thing I would like to say is that your name is very appealing to me because Ming Dao, if my translation is accurate enough, you could say it means a illumined way or luminous way.
Yes, and so that's one possible translation of it. The most probably outrageous interpretation, which I can't subscribe to. It could also mean one who understands the way. But the important part to that is that I did not give myself that name. It's a birth name that was given to me by each of my grandfathers. So in Chinese practice, everybody in one generation has the same middle name. So all the male cousins in my generation have the middle name Ming. And that was given by my paternal grandfather. So my mother went to her father and said, well, this is this designated name. What name would you pair with it? And he chose Dao. The interesting thing is that my grandfather was a Methodist lay minister and a devout Christian. So it's very curious why he chose that name. But that was my given name, and that was the name I chose to use as my title when I started my career.
I love it. So if a Christian minister adorns you with the name Dao, we might derive from that well, truth is bigger than any particular tradition or definition, and when somebody is able to see the truth, it's beyond whatever tradition they may have approached it from.
Well, I think you want to look at that last sentence literally. It is beyond any tradition you might have approached it from. And we are so used to making distinctions. And nowadays, everything is about what side you're on. And I'm not sure that you can reach the truth that way. I'm not sure that you can reach the truth by declaring, I'm from this team, everybody else is wrong, I'm the only one that's right.
Yeah.
If you go beyond the traditions, you have to recognize that every tradition has a little bit of truth in it. And so rather than saying, I'm going to brand my truth, we should be looking for the truth that is universal, beyond the systems. And aren't they, and we start out this conversation speaking of family. We all come from families, and yet we have to join the larger collective around us that is beyond our family name. In the same way, we should be looking beyond our religious orientations and looking for what is universal.
Absolutely. I'm completely with you there. I recently within the past couple of years realized there's a term. I come from a Roman Catholic background, and that tradition has a term for somebody like me: syncretism. uh you pick and choose the fruit of many different trees, so to speak. I'm not an adherent of this one and only perspective, to the exclusion of others. And I think that pretty much nobody that's viewing my channel is going to be that way either. We've reached a point where we can see past the labels and the branding, as you say, to the more universal. And I think we're all better off for it. I agree with you completely. Um, I also know that you have a quote from one of your books that appealed to me: reject labels, reject titles, reject names, and all that. That is spot on with my thinking too. I don't like to um, give terms and definitions, because that gives boundaries and limits to things, especially when you are referring to yourself. It restricts, and I don't like the way that that flows, so I avoid those things too.
Well, one of the amusing things about life is, have you ever noticed that nothing comes with a label on it? No tree, no rock, no mountain, no river, no sky, no earth. There are no labels on anything.
Yeah,
It's our human proclivity to brand everything, to name everything.
right.
And here I have to pause and say, yes, it's necessary. Nobody is going to raise a child without teaching that child language.
Hmm.
And that child has to know the names of things. And when you say to that child, well, don't you know what that's called? That's a bicycle, or that's a pineapple, and so on.
Right.
But I think when we talk about deeper philosophical contemplations, we make the mistake of assuming that those names and labels carry the same independent meaning as the object upon which they're based. And then we manipulate the language and say, see, we have found our knowledge, but we're only running around with those labels. What we ought to be doing is going back to the source of those labels, the actual reality in which we live. And I'm not someone who denies the reality of the world we're in. I think rather that all our wisdom has to be rooted in that reality, but not the labels of the reality itself. And that's a very important thing to me.
The menu is not the meal. Alan
That's
Watts.
right. That's right. And
Yeah.
the other thing I would add to it is, and you talked about being a syncretist, it's very amusing because we all know that you shouldn't just eat one kind of food all the time. If you just ate carrots every day, you wouldn't be healthy.
Right.
We're supposed to eat a lot of everything and have a varied diet. Well, shouldn't we have that same kind of diversity and range in our philosophical inquiries?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I was hoping to even point out a little bit of the irony of that term syncretism. It's even to give that a term. I in a previous episode I sort of made fun of the term earthing, which means to walk barefoot on the earth, and I said, well, that's called walking. But now they've made it more complicated, and you see these memes on Instagram spiritual pages: mutualism, this is called. And they're just slinging a term. They're promoting a term, and it's just another layer of noise to
Don't you
remove
think
us.
the motivation is they always want you to come to them? So
Excellent.
if you can give whatever your concept is some unique name, some little twist, some little brand, and you can make yourself the purveyor of that particular idea, then you get adherence, right? But I don't know that people who are really sincerely interested in a spiritual path care about branding or care about followers or anything like that. We should be able to put the knowledge out there freely and share and offer, but not try to hold people to ourselves.
I will just meet it with silent revelry. I resonate with that to the point of rattling. Um, I think also, again, I'm not looking to diverge from the topics too much, but I think that's why, let's just say, organized religion fears the mystics, is what I've observed, because the mystics are beyond all definitions, boundaries, labels, restraints. Um, you might even say, what's the word I'm looking for? Oh, I lost the word. Sorry about that. Like, for example, Apple. Apple is proprietary. That's the word that I'm looking for. There, there's a certain proprietary nature to these established institutions and ways, and the mystic is beyond them all. And so I think they sort of tremble and hope the mystic doesn't reveal too much or say too much to the followers, so to speak.
Well, I think there's an essential conflict of interest inside organized religion. They need support, they want adherence, they want to be influential. And so they lay down all these rules. They forbid you from following any other tradition. They
Mhm.
declare that they're the only one true way, and
Right,
so on. It's
right.
a kind of exclusivity that is artificial.
Yeah.
That exclusivity is not a divine revelation, it's a human practice. And so, secretly inside, one wonders if it's only a matter of external validation. Do the priests and the monks and so on only feel validated when other people agree? When they can look out in their congregation and say, oh, I have 1,000 people here, therefore I'm successful. The mystic doesn't care about any of that. The mystic wants to be alone. The mystic communes directly with the divine. The mystic does not use any other person as an intermediary between themselves and what's truly sacred to them.
Right.
And so that is a threat to organized religion,
Yeah.
because they don't need, the mystic doesn't need the trappings of organized religion. The mystic has a direct communion. It's not accidental that the religious people want to be the go-between between their congregation and the divine. They are the only means in which you can get to God, they say.
Hmm. Yeah.
And so it's that very bottlenecking of religion that is their MO. And it's precisely that that is also the problem with organized religion.
Yeah. And I would have to, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I would also add, though, in fairness, that despite that, I happen to personally know um, some monks that are mystic, and I'm sure there are some mystics who are monks. In other words, you still can be in the habit and in the organization and be a mystic. But for me, speaking for myself personally, um, I very seriously entertained the idea and the opportunity of entering a monastery at a period twice in my life, especially the second time. And even though intellectually all these perfect pictures came into my mind, well, if I were to become a monk, or if I were to become a priest, then I would be, or then I could deserve all this kind of stuff. And I couldn't do it. And it was a matter of being true to who I know I am. And I realized, and also a dear friend, Bob, that I have, put it into words so perfectly for me. He just smacked the nail on the head for me when I was sort of reaching for it and feeling it in the dark. He shined a light on it and smacked it right to me. He said, for you, being who you are, to enter a monastery would be a violation against yourself. You would be violating who you are by doing that. Um, and so for some of them, we have to acknowledge fairly that that's where they are, that's where they belong in this particular phase of their existence, and it might not have been in the past, and it may not be in the future. I know some monks that have left. One dear friend just joined the Navy, and then I know some others that it was the reverse. They were in the Navy and they said, I just can't shake this calling. I need to be in there. And, but I agree completely with you about the bottleneck thing and the freedom of the mystic, the freedom from all the tangles and and the mess of getting caught up in needing external validation and belonging and etc.
I want to make it clear that I do respect religion, and I do respect priests and monks and nuns and
Mhm.
so on.
Yeah.
I don't criticize anybody for the holy path that they walk. I'm glad for it. But I am pointing out that there can be a conflict of interest.
Hmm.
And just like any other profession, doctor, lawyer, accountant, or whatever, we have to have a clarity about what we're doing, and we have to guard against any conflict of interest that's inherent in the path that we choose. It is important to know yourself. And so that's why we shouldn't look at any one particular kind of figure and say, oh, well, that's what I want to be. I want to be just like that person,
Right.
because that person isn't you. So as an example, my master was celibate and he was an ascetic, and he is that way. And of course, that's his orientation. But he would point out that that is because it was appropriate to his personality. It's not appropriate to mine. I'm not going to be a celibate. I'm not going to be an ascetic. I'm not going to move to a mountaintop. I have to be clear about who I am.
Right.
And only by having that clarity can we then begin to apply that clarity to the spiritual task. But it also means that all kinds of people can seek spirituality. They don't have to be a formal adherent to a religion in order to glimpse reality.
Absolutely. And you're touching on some excellent points that I give a tip of the hat to my friend Rick, who I was just speaking about this topic with today. We set up, I used the term perfect pictures before. Um, we set up these perfect pictures, these very framed and clarified ideas of what we say or we believe are prerequisites. For example, well, I need to become enlightened. That would be the first one. And if I need to be enlightened, I have to shave my head, wear a saffron robe, carry an alms bowl, meditate at least 4 to 6 hours a day, wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning. I have to do these things. I must not eat any meat. I must not interact at all with women. I must not, listen to music. The list goes on ad infinitum. And what my friend Rick's point was, which was excellent, was not only are those things basically untrue, we've made them up and believed them, they can actually be detrimental to the exact goal that you are employing them to attain. They can be obstacles.
Well, let me give you a few responses. Have you ever seen an advertisement for a piece of clothing and you thought, wow, that looks so great, and you rush out to try it on and it looks terrible on you? And so we, as much as we might want to love that, and it's a good price and so on, and our favorite celebrity is wearing it, and boy, wouldn't I like to look as good as that model,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't look good on you.
Yeah.
And so you can't buy it then. You
Yeah.
can't wear it. You just look silly. So I think we have to apply that same idea to whatever we want to aspire to in terms of spirituality. It might look good, and other people are looking like that, but it doesn't look right on us. You use that
Absolutely.
term. You use that term picture. And I'm an artist. I've been an artist all my life. And you make a picture and then you look at it 5 years later and you realize you can't make that same picture. You're not the same person anymore.
That's it.
And if you said to any real artist, see this picture, I want you to draw that the rest of your life, they would go insane, because you're then turning them into a factory worker. You're not allowing them to be a living artist.
I
Of
love
all
that.
the practices that you mentioned, those are all restrictions. We engage in restrictions in order to shape the formless. And you see, if we didn't have the restrictions, we would be engaging in other activities that don't have the same structure. So we temporarily take on these restrictions in order to gain structure. An artist does the same thing. You see, take a piece of paper. It has edges. It's only so big. If the paper is square, your painting is one way. If the paper is rectangular, it's another way. If you turn it upright, portrait, that's going to dictate the contents. We have to adopt restrictions in order to be creative and in order to live. But it's a mistake to invest those restrictions with special significance.
Mhm.
Should I say, oh my God, it's a square? That's so mystical. It's not going to help me make a better painting, right?
Mhm.
So I choose the restrictions in order to stimulate my imagination, my creativity, my involvement, in order to shape what I can't shape otherwise.
Mhm.
But it's a mistake to think that all those techniques are content. The content is not due solely to the restrictions and the techniques that I select. And that's something that we have to keep in mind always.
And this is why, Ming Dao, you're not just an artist, but a philosopher. And I just respect all of the different facets that you emanate and that you resonate. In full disclosure, I think I mentioned earlier, I don't want to gush, but I really admire you personally very, very much. And I will also speak to your credit that the very first time I ever reached out to you just by a simple email or whatever it was, you were immediately receptive and genuine and kind and accessible. And that is what made me immediately like who you are, not just respect who you are.
Well, thank you. You're very kind. I am myself puzzled by the example of remote authorities. You can't get to this person. Oh, you have to talk to his secretary first, or no, he won't be here till next year. And, I don't think he's going to see someone like you.
Mm-hmm.
There's a judgment involved there. If we're really on a spiritual path, why would we judge anybody? And also, why would we evaluate what level someone is on? You accept them for where they are at that point. And then if you have something that can help them, you give it to them. Why not? There have been so many times in my life that I turned to somebody for help and they denied me.
Mm.
There are martial arts masters that I could go to and they wouldn't teach me because I don't qualify according to their standards.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit the opposite of what we were saying about religion. There's an exclusivity to a lot of people's attitudes. That seems to me in itself a denial of the very ideals that they have. And so I would hope that by sharing with other people, we can strengthen this path for everybody and we can really have what you might call an illuminated way?
Well, you are the embodiment of that. And I know that earlier we spoke about, terms and labels are not the essence of the thing itself. But if I may say so, nonetheless, you embody the deeper essence and meaning of your name, Ming Dao. And I can tell you, I know that's why you were given that name, because it is who you are. And um, not to speak too much about myself, but the name Brian means bright light, and it has two meanings. The one meaning is bright light, and the other is noble warrior set on a high place. I've come to interpret those two meanings as you could interpret them as the sacred feminine and the sacred masculine um, versions of my name, or reflections of my name. Each one embodies the feminine and the masculine together. Bright light, noble warrior set on a high place. I fail constantly, but continue to aspire in my own way, within the context of my own life, to embody and in a way live up to the name that I was given. And I love my name. And so I don't think it's any coincidence whatsoever, the name that we're given. We may even choose it in a
Well, you're
way.
fortunate to have been given such a beautiful name. You're even more fortunate that you have the wisdom to try to live up to it. I wanted to pick up on something that you said earlier, that you fail constantly. I do too. I spend every day with failure after failure, mistake after mistake. It's not the failure that matters. What matters is the perseverance, and that you keep trying. And people have this romantic idea, oh, you count your failures and eventually you'll get to a success. That's not the point. It's the process that's the point. And so you talked about these great holy people and so on who appear to be complete and finished. And especially in the great religions, they're surrounded by all this pageantry and this beautiful glittering robes and all this kind of stuff. And so we think that they're finished and complete and they're to be put on a pedestal. But really, to be honest, the person who's on a spiritual path is crawling in the mud, failure after failure, blunder after blunder, waking up every day saying, I've got to do it again. But then at the end of the day saying, I did everything I could today. And that's really the spiritual path that I walk. It's not a path of, shining golden success, complete, utterly beautiful sculptures or anything like that. It's just trying and walking. But every journey is only about left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot. Every journey can only be as wide or as long as your stride. You can't take a bigger stride, you can't take a smaller stride. It's only your stride. And the only question is, did you continue walking today? Did you keep going forward? And that's all that matters.
Bravo. And this is why I love who you are. I revere authenticity coupled with kindness, and that's you. You have another quote. I'm sorry if you'll allow me to paraphrase it. Life goes on each day. Life passes by each day, whether you choose to participate in it or not. That sort of fits. I'm sorry that I'm paraphrasing that, but
So that's fine.
yeah. And you reminded me of two other quotes, the Japanese proverb, fall down 7 times, get up 8. And the last one was, every sinner has a future and every saint has a past. Every little gem of wisdom reflects off another gem of wisdom that I've got stored somewhere up in there. And they all just light up as a constellation. When one is illumined, the others also, illuminate as well. And I just can't help but relate things.
The question is, do we engage in life?
Yeah, that's it.
And right now, you're seeing one of the consequences of civilization is people sit too much
Mm,
and they're on their screens too much.
yeah.
And so you might think that that's engagement because you're staring at a screen for hours, but all you're doing is consuming prepackaged information.
Yeah.
You're becoming someone's customer, someone's consumer, someone's audience, someone's statistic. What can you do to engage in life directly? But oh, life is boring, or I might flub it up. I made a mistake, or it's nothing but struggle. Something else broke. I have to fix it. It's going to take too long to get here. But that's exactly where life is. And as frustrating as it might be to engage with the back and forth of life, that's what's real. The irony is people say, oh, I want to feel life intensely. But what they really mean is they only want to be thrilled all the time.
Stimulated.
But life is not one long Disneyland, right? Life consists of the good and the bad. We instinctively reject the bad and we go for the good. But the irony is that bad and good always come together. They are inseparable. So when you grab for good, bad comes. When there's bad, good is hidden inside it. So only by going through those cycles and reaching deep within, observing and being a part of them, that's the only way to live life intensely.
I love it. You reminded me of John Lennon's quote, "Life is what happens while we're busy making other plans."
If we're smart enough to pay attention.
Well, as they say, more and more people are awakening. We all have to at some point. We all will. It seems like more and more. What? Not to go off on another tangent, but I see quite a more and more distinct dichotomy of, let's just say, unawakened or unconscious, like digging in deep, and also awakening, and coming, the people that are coming to be awakened are accelerating as well. There seems to be a rift. That seems to be my perception. I don't know if it's correct.
I'm not sure either, but I understand the distinction that you're making. In spiritual practice, we always talk about seeking the truth. What does that mean? That means you have to go investigate and you have to accept the truth, no matter how surprising it is. This is our problem today. We think that the truth is going to be the way we imagine it to be. And so we go out looking for that. And if it becomes too difficult to find the truth, there's some of us who are willing to make up a story. And there's some of us who have been taught, well, you ought to obey the authority of your teacher, your minister, your political leader, and so on. They're smarter than you, so you should believe them.
Yeah.
The problem is that there's so many people in those tiers of leadership, including some who are of religious backgrounds, who are either lying or they're making it up.
Yeah. Yep.
And my dissatisfaction is people who substitute a fantasy, a fairy tale, for the hard practice of finding the truth. And so much of religion, any religion, consists of stories. Are we making a mistake in believing those stories? Are we making a mistake of believing those stories literally? And are we making a mistake in saying that those stories are the absolute truth?
Right.
And they never are, just like labels are not the real thing.
Right. We are sovereign beings. And when we yield our sovereignty, such as by deferring our free will or our or relieving ourselves of the burden of making our own decisions and choices for ourselves, when we yield to authority figures to do it for us, we are forfeiting a part of ourselves in doing so, and that only has a harmful result upon us and upon the collective in the end. Um, and so I'm very big on live your life. You run your life. You make your decisions. You are sovereign. You have free will. Make your own mistakes. Make your own victories. Don't defer and capitulate to have others do it for you, which is actually, you might say, cowardly in a way as well. Um, and I think that there's a lot of people that are following that. Many examples could be given, but I also do see the other side of the coin. They just, the contrast seems to be getting more and more stark. I guess that's what I was trying to say. The contrast between the two sides of those two camps, if you will, seems to be getting more and more stark.
I know what you're saying. I think it's important to be an independent thinker.
Yeah.
And of course, those of us who have raised children, we've strained very hard to make sure that they understand who they are and that they can stand alone and independent.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we have to look at the fact that part of the spiritual assignment is to understand the relationship between the individual and the collective. And I don't mean that we should just rush out and join society or join a crowd and so on. But what is the real distinction between each of us as individuals and each of us as part of a larger body, a larger collective? Are we really only standalone figures, or do we really need other people? And is there a certain point in our spiritual outlook that we have to set aside the differences between individual and collective and recognize what the human definition is, not the definition of a person, but of all humanity?
Mm.
And if you look at that, you, any of us, are a member of our families. We each had a mother and father, we had grandparents and so on. We're part of a larger collective, our family. Will we go on if we have children? Part of ourselves goes on in those children. What is our responsibility in this world? Is it just to live independently and be an individual? Or are we also obligated to give something back to others? So it's a very strange kind of distinction that we have to make. We have to know when to assert ourselves as primary individuals and when to sublimate that difference and understand ourselves as part of a large collective.
Yeah.
And if we can manage that trick, then the next question is, when do we dispel that difference between ourselves and nature? Is there a time where we need to see the whole collective of humanity as part of the phenomenon of this planet? And then should we say that we can stand alone as a people? That has gotten us into trouble. That's why we have climate change issues. We assumed that we were independent and different from nature, and so that we could use it as a dumping ground.
Yeah.
That has gotten us into near suicidal problems.
Yeah.
So yes, we have to understand when to assert ourselves as individuals and when to take responsibility as those individuals, and when to see ourselves as part of a collective, such as our family, such as all human beings, and such as members of nature and not different than nature.
Mm. I did an episode recently that I called Disconnect and Discontent that touches on that a lot. I illustrated certain points where it's quite obvious that our species has become completely disconnected, disoriented, and lost as a result of being disconnected. And nature is one of the first things. Spirit and community or tribe and self and divinity are others. Um, I resonate so much with everything you've said. What I gather, well, let me illustrate it this way. You discussed the differences of individualism and collectivism in typically in the Asian cultures. The energy goes towards the group, and in the Western cultures, the energy generally goes towards the individual. And I've had a lot of interaction with, I have tons of Asian friends, and I've seen the fallout of that. So if you're looking from one extreme pole to the other extreme pole, you might say, yeah, that's the pole I should be on. I'm on the wrong one. But what does it all come down to? Balance. The the nice centered balance between those two extremes. To me, balance seems to be the default answer to every question. What is the balance? And that may vary by the individual, and it may vary by the group. But what is the balance? Seems to me to be that's where the resolution lies.
Balance is another way of saying functionality.
Hmm.
If you're riding a bicycle and you can't balance, you're not going to go very far.
Right.
But if you can balance, then you can continue to pedal on the bicycle. Your balance is a necessary function in order for you to continue to move. Balance also means that we neither lean to the left nor the right, unless we can find a way to use that to navigate. If we're turning on a bicycle, we are going to lean temporarily to the
Mm-hmm.
left in
Mm-hmm.
order to help us turn.
Mm-hmm.
But then after that, we have to come back to being upright.
Mm-hmm.
So people usually think, oh, I'll take half of this side and half of that side and cram them together. But maybe we need a much more dynamic sense of things, that it's never going to be just a rigid half of this and half of that, but rather it's that movement through both sides.
Yeah.
Now,
It's
you
not
could imagine,
stagnant.
that's right. You can imagine metaphorically that if you're bicycling along, you're cleaving the air in half. So might it really be that it's not about taking one half or the other, but by constantly making that division in which you are in the middle? That means you really have to know yourself, number one, but you have to know your environment, number two,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so, again, instead of having a rigid definition or trying to cut things in half, let's see ourselves as the interface between those two halves, and that interface is constantly shifting and constantly dynamic.
Yeah. You make me think again of the Taoist symbol of yin yang with the black and the white, and so many people mistakenly say, yeah, that means good and bad. No, 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 no. Good would be a balance of these two complementary forces, and bad would be an imbalance. So, it's not that one is good and one is bad, but that each contains that little nugget, that little core of the other in it. The black half contains the little white core, and the white half contains the little black core. And I've always particularly loved that detail of the yin yang symbol. And that the first time you made me think of that is when you said how life is always a blend of the good and the bad. They're inseparable. They always come together.
That's right.
Yeah, each contains a nugget of the other. And so, yeah, your illustration about balance is a fluid, flowing thing, not a stagnant uh, formula. You know.
And it can't be arrived at mechanically, and it can't necessarily be arrived at rationally.
Hmm.
I mean, I think people say, oh, look, if I could just tally everything in the box
Right.
and state the relationship of everything in the box, then I'll know reality. When in the meantime, everything is going like this,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
There's not a single subatomic particle that stands still. Everything is in motion down to a level that we cannot even sense. And if you go the other way, there's no planet, no star that stands still. Everything is moving. And think of each of ourselves, our bodies. Every cell is in motion. So it doesn't work to just say, give me all the pieces and I'll lay them out and I'll measure them and then I'll know what things are. It doesn't work that way.
I think that's what happens when the intellect is in charge and likes to categorize and diagram and arrange and rearrange and all that. I call my I call that aspect of me the meddling intellect. And it's what sometimes is a blockage or an obstacle for me, um, in the attempts of using discernment or intuiting or sensing something rather than intellectually chopping it up and figuring it out, so to speak.
I think it depends on the context. If we're going to conduct a Zoom meeting, then we need to know what the controls are. And if things don't work, well, there's something wrong. I should be able to figure it out. Well, that's fine, right? If we have to go to the supermarket and buy groceries, like, here's my list. I'm going to ignore everything else. I'm going to choose the things that I want, and I'm going to pay for them with the money that I understand down to the penny. I'm going to come home with the food. I'm going to put in the expenditure in the accounting and so on. We need all those modes, but it's a mistake to think that all those modes can become tools for spiritual inquiry as well.
That's it.
So we don't want to reject them. We just
Mhm.
have to use them when it's appropriate.
Exactly. Well, they're lenses through which to view the present circumstance or situation at hand. And what I was alluding to is that I have to check myself with regards to the intellect. I lean to the intellect lens a lot. And there's times when that is wonderful. It's a gift. I'm glad to have it. And then there's other times where it is the blinder in front of my eye, not the clear lens. So the right tool for the right application.
Have you ever noticed if you're looking in one direction, you can't look in the other?
Mm.
And I don't know if you know about this reality about the eyes. We have to stop and look. We cannot comprehend things when our eyes are in motion or when the object is in motion. We really divide it into tiny little slices, and the eye has to stop, 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 stop. That means we never can have a comprehensive view of the world. We can only have little pieces that we reconstruct in our minds. That's the way we have to live our ordinary lives. But is there a mode in which we go beyond that, in which we can glimpse reality, not through the lenses, not through the eyes, not through point of view, but through a merging with the reality itself? And that's a kind of perception and presence that is important to have in our lives as well. So, yes, we have contradictions in the way we conduct ourselves, as necessary as they are. But that makes it more important to develop the other abilities of spiritual practice and find other ways of investigation, experience, and connection.
Ming Dao, what message would you have for us today that are experiencing the way the world is? I'll just call it that way, as it applies to where you are on your path. What could you offer to people who are, frankly, we're struggling. I don't know anyone that's not, unless they're being delusional or dishonest about it. Um, what would you offer in this era that we live in from your continuous journey where you're at now?
Everything we've been talking about in our conversation today is about the problem of distinction and differences.
Mm.
There's one value that everybody in the world can agree upon, and that is life. Everyone wants to live. Everyone understands the importance of protecting and nurturing life. Hidden in that, of course, is an abhorrence of death.
Mm.
But that means that only emphasizes how much life is a universal value. To me, life is energy, and life is therefore the greatest sacred value that we can have in our existence. That life transcends the individual, but is also in the individual. So we talked about the connection between the individual and the collective. An individual is alive, all human beings are alive. Now, if you look at life, it extends beyond ourselves. It was here before we were born. It will continue on for millennia, if not millions of years after we're gone. So therefore, life is eternal. And that's the eternal divine that we really all need. That life forms a direction. One way of thinking about that is evolution. It's progressing in a certain way. It has a trajectory. It's moving. Therefore, life is Tao. Life is a way. Life is coherent. It has a direction. Can we support life? If everything that we do in our daily activities is to nurture and support life, not just within ourselves, but in others, then that's goodness. If we do things that deny life to other people, and I'm not talking about going out and murdering someone, I'm talking about the little things, lying to people, being cruel to people, discriminating against them,
Yeah.
turning away from them, stealing from them, exploiting them as customers, trying to force them to become your political allies.
Mm-hmm.
All those things deny life, they diminish life. And yet, look how irrepressible life is. The population of this world is increasing. That alone is evidence that life continues to return. We're about to go into winter in the Northern Hemisphere. Everything's going to die, and then it's going to sprout again in spring. That's renewal. That's miraculous.
Yeah.
So the greatest value, the greatest Tao, the greatest divinity, the greatest sacredness is life. And after all the labels, Taoist, Catholic, Buddhist, whatever it is, beyond all the labels, beyond all the intellect, there's only life. And that's all we have to follow.
I love it. I love it. I love it. And any path that's on the right course or in the right direction embraces that unquestioningly.
Absolutely.
I thought of the phrase, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. All those things you could call that, that's what they're referring to. And it's, it's remarkably simple. Be kind. Be
That's
kind.
right.
Be kind to everyone all the time. What was it the Dalai Lama said? Always be kind. Be kind to others every time you have the opportunity. Whenever it is possible. That's what he said. Be kind whenever it is possible. It is always possible. So we we do, especially with the way the world is today, as I alluded to before. More than ever do we need to be kind to each other amidst our disagreements. Very distinctly will I say that, amidst our disagreements. Agreement isn't necessary, but kindness is. So,
Absolutely. I agree completely.
Ming Dao, you have absolutely graced this platform with your presence and your offerings and all the things that you have given of your sacred self. And I receive them with absolute happiness and thankfulness and reverence for you, frankly. And I just can't express enough how much I appreciate you and appreciate you for coming here and sharing with me and with us, the viewers, all that you have offered for us today. And I'm sure that it is meaningful and useful to everyone who has viewed this discussion and this conversation with us today. Thank you.
Thank you, and bless you for the mission that you're pursuing. Bless you for doing this and putting this offering out in the world. And I wish my greatest blessings to everybody who's viewing this video. So thank you very much.
Well, on that note, I would like to remind everyone, as always, to abide in thankfulness for your highest good in the most benevolent outcome of the divine will. Thank you, Deng Ming Dao. You are a blessing.
Thank you.